honestly, now that Bloodborne's finished, I don't know if I have as much to say about it, so I'll just quickly dip into some of my history of the Soulsborne games in like 10 seconds, and then I'll talk about Bloodborne as a whole compared to that, right? So my experience with playing through the FromSoft games are, I played Sekiro first, then I played through Dark Souls 3, and now we're coming on to Bloodborne. Although I will also add that I've also played Code Vein, which is like a Soulsborne-esque kind of game. It's like an anime weeaboo version. It's very good. Not as tricky, but nonetheless worth mentioning. You guys might have played Code Vein. And I've also played Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which again mirrors, or at least tries to kind of represent the Souls-esque structure with the whole campfires and the difficulty and whatnot. Not as challenging, again, I would argue, but that's not even the point of this discussion. That is my experience. So coming into Bloodborne, I feel like at this point, I can't really say that I'm a Souls noob anymore. I mean, I'm still bad, but I'm not exactly coming in as like a fresh kind of player to the series. We've got a decent amount of experience, and when I came into Bloodborne, I was really excited because so many people had told me within my friend group and from you guys that Bloodborne was one of the kings, one of the titans, one of the best ones. And for the most part, I'm glad we played it. I'm glad it's finished. I'm glad it's done. We haven't played the DLC for anybody who hasn't caught the actual streams and are watching this review blind, but I thought I'd give you guys my two-piece on it. Bloodborne, did I enjoy the game overall? I mean, I think I did. It was obviously pretty good, and there is a thrill to beating the game, which is really exciting. Again, you don't get that rush elsewhere in other games, in my opinion. It's something I've said throughout the playthrough. Did I like Bloodborne as much as the other games? I'm not sure. I've had this discussion throughout the entire series with you guys. We streamed this game over 5 days. We've just finished the base game, did the extra boss against the Moon Presence and all that stuff. And all through the series, we've been having discussions about where Bloodborne ranks, and a lot of you guys put Bloodborne at the top. So let's talk about all the things I liked, and then I'll tell you about some of the things that I didn't like. But for the most part, Bloodborne was good. It felt very challenging. I would argue, maybe it was just because I played Sekiro first and then Dark Souls 3 first, but I feel like Bloodborne was quite tough for me compared to some of the other games in the series. But anyways, the things I liked about Bloodborne was obviously the kind of the aesthetic, obviously, that they've got going on here. It is very Soulsborne, but you've obviously got the Victorian-esque style. It kind of feels like, you know, I don't want to say ancient London, but I like the kind of Victorian, Transylvanian kind of Lovecraftian, to a certain degree, angle that this game has. The Hunter's Dream that we come back to, all of the starting area in the kind of town of Yharnam, going down to the hamlet below Yharnam, and then later on to some of the more kind of bigger castles like Cainhurst and that. All of that stuff is great. You would expect to see that in Soulsborne, and I was really pleased that Bloodborne had such grand areas to explore. There wasn't as much annoying areas in this game as well. I feel like there was tough areas, and there was areas that I definitely won't enjoy going back to, that I won't name too many of those right now because it would take a while. But when I played through Dark Souls 3, I remember distinctively certain areas. When I think of Sekiro, I think of areas that I really don't want to play through. Sekiro, the swampy area with the poison stuff where you fight Snake Eyes, and then to a certain degree with Dark Souls 3, maybe when you go down into the tombs, that whole swamp area as well. It's always the swamps that get me. I felt like in Bloodborne there actually wasn't as many bad areas. Sure, there will be areas that people really like, and then there'll be areas that people fucking hate. But for me, I felt like to just play through the exploration parts of Bloodborne in between the bosses felt really nice. The only thing that I would be a bit nervous about coming back to is obviously Bloodborne seems to take the difficulty up a notch in terms of its bonfire locations, or lamps as they're called in this game. You know, these kind of teleportation beacons that is your freedom, is your safety, takes you back to the Hunter's Dream. I felt like coming back from, just coming out of Dark Souls 3, where I would argue there's an abundance of bonfires in Dark Souls 3. Bloodborne is challenging, I think, in the sense that it doesn't give you as many points. I don't know the exact measurements between the bonfires, so don't quote me on that, but it feels like on a first casual playthrough, that's definitely my interpretation. It felt like I was really struggling sometimes to get through an area. Normally when you're in a part of the level for about 30 minutes, you kind of know that there's a shortcut coming somewhere, like there's going to be an elevator that you can jump back on and take you back up or take you back down, depending on which direction you've came from. And it felt like Bloodborne was a bit more tricky that way, which wasn't a bad thing. It was just something that I had to learn to adapt to, and that kind of made me feel the pressure a bit more, I would say. I will quickly touch on some of the negatives as well, but again, the negatives come from a point of love, so if you guys are sitting here being like, Jack, please don't criticise Bloodborne, it's my favourite game, I'll have to talk about some of the things that kind of trip me up a little bit and also kind of fatigue me a little bit at times. The blood vial system is different, obviously, to Sekiro, to Dark Souls 3. You don't have Estus flasks anymore. And on one hand, this is good for exploration, in my opinion, because you're able to make it through long portions of the exploration area, and you can actually get heals back from enemies. You know, you kill an enemy, a random big enemy, he'll drop a blood vial, and suddenly you can explore a little bit more comfortably. It's like you've got this huge amount of extra lives in your back pocket, so to speak, and that makes exploration super simple. However, when it came to some of the boss fights, if you don't beat the boss first try, which is going to be common for a lot of players, I did kind of feel a bit sad about having to go and re-grind up my heals again after we had died, right? So it didn't happen too much. It happened specifically quite often for me towards the end when we were fighting against the first hunter guy, and then again before we fought against the moon presence, we had to go and grind a bunch. Every time we lost to the boss, I would then have to go and grind a bunch of heals. Now, if I was good at the game and we beat them, you know, quite quickly, we wouldn't have to do that, admittedly. But I think there's going to be a lot of players that might get fatigued by having to go and refill your heals all the time, having to go and collect bullets if you use the parry system quite a lot in this game. That for me just didn't really feel that fun stuff. Not as much weapon diversity in this game, I noticed, compared to like Dark Souls 3, for example. But yeah, I sometimes I didn't mind that. We had the discussion earlier yesterday, so I won't talk about it too much, but sometimes I feel like less is more. And the restricted kind of weapon the restricted kind of weapon catalogue wasn't a bad thing for me, and honestly I didn't notice it. I used like 3 weapons in the whole game. I used the starting pistol throughout the whole game, just kept upgrading it, and honestly I feel like that's a viable strategy. I didn't have this constant pressure of being like, oh shit, maybe I should be trying out this weapon or this weapon or this weapon. Am I doing this inefficiently? Is my weapon outdated? You know, sometimes players might think about that a bit too much and then end up getting a bit fatigued again, but Dark Souls 3, you've got a huge catalogue of weapons to play through on repeated playthroughs, which is nice, but I quite like the Bloodborne was quite simple. It made the first playthrough fairly straightforward and enjoyable. I will quickly point out that as another negative, I'm kind of bouncing between these quite quickly, but I'm just remembering these things as they come to me. I felt like my camera angle in Bloodborne was quite awkward at times compared to like other games, and it basically came down to trying to lock on with the R3 button. So in this game, if you are looking at an enemy and you click on R3, it will lock onto the target. But if you miss the target, if the game doesn't register the lock on, what will happen is your character will do this, where it actually rotates the camera away. So let's say I'm running down the hill and there's an enemy behind me and I click and it misses, suddenly I'm in this preposterous situation where you just get absolutely fucking destroyed. And there was a couple of moments where I was trying to lock on and there was a bit of jankiness. Again, it didn't break the game for me, and it wouldn't really stop me from playing the game or recommending the game, but this is something that's worth noting. Sometimes you're stuck against the wall, and if the boss is like super huge, you're like this, trying to see the boss. A lot of the points of the bosses when you are fighting against them, the lock-on point of the boss will be around the boss's kind of like waist area, round about where its balls should be, and sometimes that was quite problematic for me as well, especially on the restricted areas. Now you could argue that that's intentionally done so. Maybe they're trying to add that as a challenge. You know, you've got a restricted room, it's very claustrophobic, that's why the boss is kind of exciting to watch. But sometimes it kind of felt annoying. A lot of the bosses in Bloodborne are huge. There's a couple of humanoid figures, sure, but a lot of the bosses are massive, and sometimes getting in close, which is what you're supposed to do, can be really troublesome. And I just didn't feel like I had as much of a drama with that in some of the other games that I played. But the frame rate on the console, because we're playing Bloodborne on PS4 as it stands, I think there's a PS5 version of Bloodborne, maybe. And there's rumours of a PC version. I hope one day this game does come to PC, because the frame rate was a bit laggy at times. I mean, you can almost see it here in this area here. We caught it earlier, these little creatures on the side. It didn't really cause too many problems, but sometimes if you're in an intense area where there's multiple enemies attacking you, when you're rolling for your life, you're trying to heal, and then, you know, the frame rate reduces to like fucking 20 FPS, 10 FPS sometimes, and it really grates, and it can actually kill you at times. We didn't have too many instances like that, but I saw it, and the performance is definitely worth pointing out. But I really have to point this out, guys, and this is something that bothered me on day one. Again, a lot of players aren't going to give a fuck about, but I've got to mention it. When I am going in to buy stuff from the shop here, when I'm looking at clothes in particular, the fact that when I'm buying new clothes, it doesn't show me a comparison of like what I have on at the minute versus what I'm about to buy is super troublesome for me, especially in a game that gives you so much data. I mean, all the info that Bloodborne gives you, all the kind of data that Dark Souls gives you. It loves numbers, these games. The FromSoft games, they love numbers. And it's cool. It's very D&D-esque, which is really good. But if I'm going in to buy stuff from the store, I really need to see a comparison of what I'm wearing versus what I'm about to buy. Otherwise, I can't fucking see whether it's actually better or not. You know, I would have to literally... I can see, you know, I can push triangle and I can see my stats behind my head here, sure. But that's obviously taking into consideration the clothes I have on right now. So I can't actually see the direct difference between the two, and again, that's not going to bother players at all sometimes, but for me it's just so weird because I would have to go into here and I'd have to think, okay, look, so I get slow poison resistance 60 with this Black Church garb on, right? When I go back into the shop, it feels like it doesn't show as clearly as it could, and I have no idea what they were thinking there. Again, it's not going to bother some people that much, but to me I was just like, dude, that is like the fundamental, surely. Just could have been clearer. Just could have been a little bit smoother. But for the most part, yeah, Bloodborne. Did I enjoy this game as much as the other FromSoft games? Me personally, I can see the appeal, but this game annoyed me a couple of times. Do I want to play through it again immediately? Maybe. Just to kind of, you know, play through the game and kind of see the fights again and practice and get better. That could definitely be a thing. Maybe we'll play through it again one day. But I don't know if I enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed some of the more other games which felt a little bit more polished. Again, no stick on the game because I know a lot of people love it. But I would be lying if I said this was my absolute favourite one in the series. And that could purely be my sequencing of the games. You know, maybe if I played Bloodborne first, I would love it the most. But I'm playing this game as like the third or fourth one. And yeah, good, but annoying at times. And ultimately that kind of made me a bit... kind of took the kind of triumphant nature I felt out of the game at times, but I would still recommend it. If you're a FromSoft fan and you've not tried Bloodborne yet, then absolutely give it a go, because you're missing out on a fantastic, challenging game. Good point, actually. In this game, Bloodborne, when you are going to the lamps, the bonfires, right, as they are in other Souls games, you can't actually tap the bonfire for health and rest at the lamp, which is a feature I don't know why they took out. There's probably a reason to it. There's probably a tactical decision that they've chosen to do rather than an oversight. I don't think you can make an oversight like that. They've obviously chosen to do that, but I don't know why I have to, if I want my health back, why I have to travel back to Hunter's, you know, the Hunter's area, this place. And I don't know why I can't travel between lamps either. Like, I don't know why I can't go from, say, you know, the old chapel or whatever it's called, you know, the cathedral area, to maybe one of the other regions. The fact that I have to come back here and then go back in is very bizarre.